My name is Satyadasa, for those who don't know me. I'm going to be talking about a pretty wild subject this evening. I'm going to give it a whirl. It's part of our series, The Creative Symbols of the Tantra. And they're pretty exciting, these images, and tonight is no exception. So hopefully by the end of this evening you will have gone with a modern Thai master into the cremation ground, and you will have visualized so many ways into this topic, the cremation ground and the Dakinis. It can sound very esoteric, and in many ways it is. When we take up Buddhist practice, sometimes we're going to feel really inspired. You're going to feel like, particularly if you just started. So if you're in your first months, year, or several years of practice, you often feel just on fire with the practice. You feel that this meditation is really helping me, or I'm finding out about myself, or I love the community, there's something about the Sangha that's really attractive. It might be you get inspired by what this means in terms of society or loving kindness, what that means. Or you might get fired up by the big things, like you might think, this Buddhism, it seems really true. You can wheel out big words like that. There's some truth in this. Or sometimes we can just lose our inspiration. We lose our energy for practice. Our energies just become, dissipated in the daily round of things that we do. And we can get locked in our habits, and we can go through periods and tracks of time. Even if you're practicing, even you consider yourself, to be, a Buddhist or whatever you want to call yourself, but things become very safe. They become very known, and that's just a rhythm of life, isn't it? That things have this sort of opening up moments that we have, and then they're kind of a closing down. That's kind of normal. And sometimes our outlooks or our views, opinions, beliefs, we can become very settled in them. We can easily become settled in some political opinion, like we're a right-thinking kind of person, whether we're a socialist or self-contented in our views about capitalism, or whatever the view is. We can kind of become that, because when I was thinking, who am I to be talking about the Dakini? The Dakinis are variously known as flesh-eating ogresses, or celestial maidens, or sky dancers. And so, who am I to be talking about these incredible figures from this amazing tradition of the Tantra? But then, of course, I realised that was exactly the kind of self-view, that probably the Dakini or a lot of these images would want to break through. I probably think, who am I to talk about Buddhism even, And in a way that's true, but in a way it's a limit as well that I recognise in myself. And certainly I can say that I don't know if you can relate to this, that like if you're in a kind of a place in your life that's suffering, you want to get out of the suffering, but sometimes you're in a place that is sort of okay, it works. There's definite, you rub up against things, bad things happen, but more or less it's okay. But I still get this feeling that there's something very, very limited about my mind, very, very and sometimes I can just feel a bit sort of helpless about how I'm going to break out of that. It's like I really need fresh ground here. I really need something to break me out of this. But sometimes it's like Buddhist practice that as I conceive of it, either I just don't do it, which is probably true, or I half do it or something, or it's just not enough. So these images that come from the Tantra really bring the whole of Buddhist practice right to your front door. They're about evoking energy. They're not abstract, and they are about an immediate confrontation. So when we say, I bow to the Buddha, in the Tantra, things get a much, much closer, much less abstract. And the whole point of the Tantra is to awaken energy, to channel energy, to bring a sense of urgency, and to just break up all your limiting notions, even if they're good notions, worthy notions or whatever. So the cremation ground, I'm going to deal with that first. The whole image is the cremation. In the cremation ground, there are the Dakinis. In fact, the whole image, and it is an image. It is an image. It's a very powerful image, and it's very common in the Tantra. Is the image of the guru, the awakened teacher, the guru in the cremation ground, surrounded by corpses, with Dakinis dancing around him or her in the sky. So that is the complete image. We'll come to Dakinis, hopefully. Well, we will. So the cremation ground, in traditional practice, so in early Buddhist practice, there was lots of times the Buddha would send his disciples off to a local cremation ground to observe what the goings on in a cremation ground. So either the cremation of the bodies, the decomposition of the bodies being just left, more often than not apparently they were just left, and sometimes buried, but mostly just left, and torn apart by wild animals, go through various phases of dissolution really into bones and dust. And that was the practice that the Buddha recommended to his disciples. And obviously here, there is a confrontation. There's a confrontation going on with fear. The point isn't. Well, yes, you're pushing yourself there. So I'm going to just read something in a moment about this. In fact, why don't I do that now? Because I'll take us straight into this. This is a reading. I was sort of hesitating to read this to you because it's quite graphic. It's not graphic because of the corpse thing. We've done the corpse bit. But it's quite full on this. So this is Ajahn Chah, who is a forest monk, so from the Thai forest tradition. He died, I think, in the 1980s, possibly the 1990s. He was a very well-respected and towards the end of his life, certainly he was, a highly revered teacher and a maverick. So I don't want to say a maverick, but he was like a Zen teacher wearing the Thai clothes of a Thai monk. His teachings were very direct, very simple in a way, deceptively simple, very practical. He had no time for false piety. He had no time for, anything but the task of awakening. And he was tough, I think. Anyway, this is probably from his earlier days, when so he's still probably an abbot of a monastery, but maybe I'm imagining he's a young abbot here. And I'll read some of this. He says, "It was nearing nightfall. There was nothing else for me to do. If I tried to reason with myself, I knew I'd never go. So I grabbed a novice monk and just went." I don't know why he grabbed a novice monk, but a bit of security maybe. "It's time to take a look at your fear," I had told myself. If it's time for me to die, then let me die. If my mind is going to be so stubborn and stupid, then let it die. That's what I thought to myself. Actually, in my heart, I didn't really want to go, but I forced myself to. When it comes to things like this, if you wait till everything's just right, you'll end up never going. So I just went. Sangharakshita calls it's that conscious movement towards the cremation ground, that we go towards that which we fear deliberately. So he's admitting to himself that he doesn't really want to go, but the conditions will never be right. So let's go. And he in the next page, which I won't read it all out, but he describes how he arrives at this cremation ground, which is in a fairly desolate place. It's obviously not a place where there's a hustle and bustle of the market and people don't live there. These places were out there, so for obvious reasons. And he sets up his mosquito net, and He said, when it was dark, I got into my mosquito net hanging from the glot. I think that's the kind of way they would put up the mosquito net. It felt as if I had 7 layers of walls around me. Seeing my trusty alms bowl there beside me was like having the company of an old friend. Its presence beside me was comforting. Even a bowl can be a friend sometimes. So he's there. He's in the cremation ground, and he's just got behind a mosquito net. And I've been on solitary retreats in my life. This is one of the ways in which people around here, we don't have a cremation ground to go to. You may well have been to a cremation ground, but not in this country. But we often go on solitary retreats, and that's most commonly where people do encounter some fear. I consider that an achievement to feel fear on a solitary retreat, if you do feel fear. I'll come back to that. But sometimes I go on a solitary retreat, and so I'm in my hut in the evening, and it gets dark, and I've got lights on in my hut, and I suddenly feel very vulnerable because there's darkness outside. There's absolutely no one past my hut, there's no one near my hut, there's no one even threatening to come and look in through the window. But I feel vulnerable. I feel vulnerable. Partly it might be just on privacy. I don't want people looking in the hut. But if I'm honest, what it is also is a fear of something outside that might approach, and I just get this fear. This kind of evokes fear in me, and I just close the curtains pretty much straight away. Actually, I don't really sit with my fear. I think I just close the curtains. That's good, and just tiny bit of fabric. That makes me feel fine. I feel absolutely fine then. I just carry on reading or whatever. And it's the same thing. It's just this little mosquito net somehow has done the job. He gets inside it and he feels like he's surrounded by this wall that's going to protect him from the mad axeman that's coming through. They're not going to be bothered by a curtain. That's probably easy for them. So yes, he's never done this. He says he's never sat watching a body all night. Somebody there and he comes back and he sits the night and he finds it really quite difficult, but he gets through it. And in the morning he says, "Oh, I've survived. I've survived a whole night sitting there with this dead body, just under the ground or whatever." And he says, "Oh, I'm gonna stay here again tonight, and this is gonna be much easier. I'm feeling good now. I've survived. I can do this." But unfortunately, another funeral party comes along, and this is what I want to read. And they cremate this body right by his mosquito net. Sitting and watching the body burning all night, I can't tell you how it was. Words can't describe it. Nothing I say could convey the fear I felt. In the dead of the night, the fire from the burning corpse flickered red and green, the flames crackled softly. I wanted to do walking meditation, but I couldn't bring myself to. The stench from the flesh lingered in the air. Eventually I just got into my net. As the flames gently flickered, I turned my back on the fire. I forgot about sleep. Well, I'll sit here and die. I'll sit and die here. I'm not moving from this spot. Here, talking of the ordinary mind, would it want to do this? Would that mind take you into such a situation? If you tried to reason it out, you'd never go. Who would want to do such a thing? If you didn't have strong faith in the teaching of the Buddha, you'd never do it. Now, at about 10 p.m, I was sitting with my back to the fire. I don't know what it was, but there came a sound of shuffling from the fire behind me. Had the coffin just collapsed? Or maybe a dog was getting at the corpse? But no, it sounded more like a water buffalo walking slowly around. Oh, never mind. But then it started walking towards me, just like a person. It walked up behind me, the footsteps heavy like a buffalo's, and yet not. Leaves crunched underfoot as it made its way around to the front. Well, I could only prepare for the worst. Where could I go? But it didn't really come up to me. It just circled around in front and then went off in the direction of the novice. And then it was quiet. I don't know what it was, but fear made me think of many possibilities. It must have been half an hour later, I think, when the footsteps came back, just like a person. Right up in front of me this time, heading as if to run me over. I closed my eyes and refused to look. It got closer and closer until it stopped dead in front of me and stood stock still. I felt as if it was waving burnt hands back and forth in front of my eyes. This was really it. I threw out everything. I forgot the mantra words Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. I forgot everything else. There was only fear filling me to the brim. My thoughts couldn't go anywhere. From the day I was born, I had never experienced such fear. There was only fear welling in my chest until it felt like a tightly stretched drum skin. Then he has this little dialogue with himself as he describes this fear. He says, "The fear built up so much within me that it reached this peak and began to overflow. What am I so afraid of anyway?" a voice asked inside me. "I'm afraid of death," another voice answered. "Well then, where is this thing, death? Why all the panic? Look where death abides. Where is death? Why, death is within me. If death is within you, then where are you going to run to escape it? If you run away, you die. If you stay here, you die. Wherever you go, it goes with you, because death lies within you. There's nowhere you can run to. Whether you're afraid or not, you die just the same. There's nowhere to escape death." As soon as I'd thought this, my perception seemed to change right around. The fear completely disappeared, as easily as turning over one's hand. It was truly amazing. So much fear, and yet could disappear just like that. Fearlessness rose in its place, and now my mind rose higher and higher until I felt like I was in the clouds. And he goes on, but he talks then about how the rain began to fall. It's a lovely passage, actually. He talks about the rain began to fall, and he was in this fearless state, and yet even then he started to have thoughts about, there's no one here to see what I've just done. And he starts to feel very alone and sad for himself, and he cries. He just cries, releases all these tears, and it's a very human description for a very revered master to sort of talk in this way about his experience. Shows you that everybody goes through, well, all these great teachers have gone through something quite profound. And he says, if you haven't wept like this, if you haven't really done this, confronted this situation in this way, you're really, your practice is going to have its limits. That doesn't mean we necessarily have to go to a cremation ground. Although Ajahn Chah was very, very strict, really. He always emphasized, not just yakking on about Buddhism and meditation and the Dharma, but actually, you probably need to do something, really. If you're going to get the results that you want, you need to step out of your comfort zone. But this is in a way, it's a practice which is beyond reason. It's not. We're not going to reason ourselves into a situation like that. You're going to have to step out, and it brings forth the really heroic qualities that are necessary in the spiritual life. It's quite common to emphasize, compassion, empathy, all these qualities which are on the softer side, the more heartfelt side, which are all important and which we all need more of anyway. But there's also the fearlessness. There's also resoluteness. Those kind of qualities. So, where does the fear come from? Do you do that? Have you ever? You could go sit in a graveyard. Has anybody ever done that? Sat in a graveyard? Not just because it's a nice place to sit and they've got a bench from Ethel and whatever. Because it's nice, isn't it, to sit in a graveyard? They're usually quite pleasant. I always feel a bit... my tendency in a graveyard is to feel a bit, what do you call it? Inflated. I feel inflated for being alive. That's embarrassing. Because I've done quite well to be alive now. No, that's 1873. They hardly any of them got above 40 or whatever, and I was careless of them, wasn't it? And I get this sort of ridiculous inflation. But I suppose if I was to examine my mind, there is death, isn't there? Even in an English graveyard, obviously you cannot but be aware of death if you go into a graveyard. You might just go in flash, and probably if you stayed there long enough, night would fall, and then you would become a person of concern in the locality. You probably get moved along. But so you could do this in a graveyard. You could just go and sit there and just see what the feelings are. But where does this really come from? Why are we afraid at this very deep level? Well, what the traditional teaching is that we're afraid because of delusion. It's our delusion which keeps us afraid. And the fear here is so profound and deep that what we're talking about can't be just can't be merely a wrong idea, or it can't be something that we could just correct by reading a textbook about Buddhism or anything else. It's a very deep perspective, or a very deeply held conviction that is almost beyond our reach. It's beyond the reach of reason, So the traditional analysis would be something like we're really strongly clinging to this life. We're very identified with this very life. And when you say it like that, identification with this very life, it's quite a big thing to imagine, because of course I'm identified with this life. Yeah, of course I'm. This is my life. This is where I find myself. So to point at identification with this body, this life, it shows you that something quite deep is being pointed to here. So it's a clinging. Is this clinging, or that's another word for identification, really? A strong identification that causes suffering. This is a key Dharma teaching. In one school of Buddhism called the Yogacara, and I'll just give a brief analysis of this. It's a rational analysis, and but maybe it's worth it anyway. So consciousness is obviously not a thing. Consciousness is not divided. No experience. This experiencing moment, there is no. You can't divide it into bits. Well, you can for the purposes of talking about it, but it's whole, yeah. But in the Yogacara, they talk about the mind as having these three sort of broad phases, and the first, the outward phase is what they call the sense consciousnesses. What we hearing, sight, smell, touch, taste. And also the mind sense. So there's actually 8 consciousnesses, and the first 6 of them are what we would recognize as the 5 consciousnesses and the mind consciousness, which organizes the others into a sort of a coherent picture of this room, of the cushion. It's all pieced together, all the various impressions. So that's a consciousness, that's a sense consciousness. Then the ground, if you like. So there's this consciousness which is called the storehouse consciousness. It's a really fantastic teaching. So it's asking us to envisage that there is this that consciousness itself is just a bit out of reach from us. It's like the way that the eyeball cannot see itself. There is you can be aware, but what you're aware of is not easy to put your finger on. It's not easy to sort of pin it down and know it. So in the Yogacara, they envisage this ground of consciousness, this storehouse. They call it the alaya, which alaya means the store, or the container, like the Himalayas are the store of the snows. So it's the alaya vijnana. And we can only deal with it in images, so it might be that... so what happens is, so we act. With our minds, we act. And our actions, the quality of our actions, whatever they are, they seed this alaya. It's like dropping a seed into this alaya. And at a later point in time, if you're thinking about this in terms of the flying, but how we conceive of our actions. So it's this picture of we're moving through life, and our whole experience is being conditioned and reconditioned and reconditioned on the basis of our actions and our thoughts and our views. So the kind of world that comes into being on the basis of, say, if we practice the metta bhavana, this is why, Buddhist teaching is the teaching of meditation is not to be dismissed as a small thing. If your mind is turning towards metta, you are dropping seeds of metta into this consciousness, and the metta is the strong desire for the welfare of others, the welfare of all, and this starts to perfume and seed our ordinary life or our experience. But in between this deep ground out of which everything arises, so I'll just say one more thing. Out of this consciousness arises both what we see as the inner world of the self and the outer world of the senses. So the inner perceiving world, the perceiver, and the outward perceived world arise from the alaya. So the alaya really is everything that we experience. It's not very easy, certainly for me, to say what this actually is referring to. So it is an image of something going on, and we have to intuit that we're talking about. So it's a bit. So if you had a seed, eventually that seed would grow, and then two little leaves might form, and that would be the inside and the outside aspect of every experience. So it's a very deep, and then there's this mind that is the only one not referred to. So we have the six sense sense consciousnesses, the organizing mind. We have the consciousness that is deep, that is everything. And then we have our deluded mind. And the deluded mind latches on to the alaya, which is giving birth to each moment, and latches onto it and identifies it with myself and the world. So it kind of identifies what is arisen as this is me, this is the world, this is the world out there that I experience through my sense consciousnesses. So this is called the manas, and this is a discriminative consciousness. And this school of Buddhism does not sort of say that this division into subject and object doesn't exist. It clearly exists because we're having that experience all the time. But it does say that it can't be the basis for any further assertion about a self which exists behind this moment of experience, which is having this moment of experience, nor can it be taken as conclusive proof that there is a world which exists independently of the experiencing situation, which I might refer to as, you guys and the world and the universe. So there is in this school of Buddhism is saying that the mind that really needs purification, and the mind which creates this fear and ultimately creates this suffering, is this deluded mind which has a very, very fixed notion deep within us that we exist in a separate and fixed format, and that we are the owners of our experience. And we really are the owners of a thing called experience. And there really is a world to which our experience seems to refer. And so you can see, even from my probably not very good explanation of that this is a deep delusion, and it's not something that you can rationally just discard. So you can either go to the cremation ground, or it's the threefold path that starts to purify the mind and seed the storehouse of consciousness in a different way. So ethics is stopping those actions which just reinforce this mistake in a crude kind of way. So if we're acting with craving or with hatred, these are wrapped up in that is the whole delusion, and that we're reinforcing it, and that what's going to give birth to is suffering and more suffering, and the round of life, the wheel of life goes round. And meditation, so metabhavna, awareness, or experiencing higher states of absorption. And these are all on the basis of a mind which is that is brought about, which is not so completely overwhelmed by a sense of polarizing or the sort of duality of hatred or resentment or, endless craving, some of the things that Surya Gupta spoke about in the Wheel of Life a few weeks ago, that is more malleable, the kind of mind that arises on the basis of metta, continual or consistent meditation practice, and on the basis of cutting out some of the things that create a lot of suffering for ourselves, our actions, maybe performing more generous actions, more loving actions, more at least stopping and pausing and thinking about the effects we have. On that basis of that mind arises the possibility of really lightening this duality, so it's this dualism. So it's not so... Almost the definition of a good state is you're not self-absorbed. Lightness around us when we're in a good state and when we've looked after our minds. And then finally the stage of wisdom. So wisdom in the Yogacara is talked about in this beautiful phrase, the turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness. It's a lovely phrase. I mean, heaven knows what it means. But it might be that these practices like entering a cremation ground or facing fear is really challenging, because this is evoking a very strong fear is what was it? It's fight or it's flight or it's freeze, isn't it? So seeing into this, there's something that's being clung to. There's an identification which has some very deep purchase on us. It's beyond our easy grasp. It's beyond reason, really. This is the root delusion. And when this is relinquished, when this is seen through, then what arises is not taken. You're free from clinging then. You're not clinging to experience in terms of a self and a world. You're going to carry on experiencing. That's the way our whole sense organs are constructed, is to show us the world in terms of self and object and the mind. So it's not that would stop, but there would be a deep letting go of what we can hardly imagine from our ordinary states. So in our ordinary states of mind, we just think that's the way the world is, the way the world is presented to me through my senses, through my thinking about stuff. It might be a bit off sometimes, but basically it's okay. I could read a bit more, watch a few more podcasts, I'll get things straight. But actually what this is saying is that it's indicating something beyond that. So Ajahn Chah was very insistent that you have to make a big effort to get great results. So this is the image that we have, the cremation ground. So taking it more symbolically, in the mandalas, in the mandala pictures, which we haven't got one here, but there's 8 cremation grounds symbolizing those 8 consciousnesses that I've just mentioned, and those are encircling the mandala. And what they symbolize is the transformation of consciousness. So cremation grounds are symbols for the burning point of transformation. And in the Mahayana and the Tantra, they're transformed into the mandala of the Buddhas. But what the cremation ground becomes in more general way, is an image of life itself. So we are in this cremation ground. This is what life is. It's life in death. I don't know whether this strikes you, but and it's an image, and images just need to be dwelt on and to be absorbed. And Sangharakshita says that the cremation ground really is the crucial situation deliberately sought out. And of course we're thrown into cremation ground sometimes completely against our wishes, and that is extremely painful. I went to a cremation ground once in India, as I'm sure many of you have. I've been to them in Nepal as well. Again, my rational mind wouldn't let me be really fearful, and it was the day, and I just couldn't. I was it definitely puts you off eating. It sobers you up big time, you just, okay. So it sort of sobers up and it has that effect. But afterwards I left the cremation ground, and I had taken a photograph at the cremation ground, and I wasn't allowed to do that. And I was, in fact, almost beaten up for doing that. I was very lucky to get out, actually. So I experienced fear then, big time, when there was some guys bearing down on me, and I was. But he rescued me. But that kind of fear, where you're that's so awful. Can anyone share a cremation ground? What would be a cremation ground for you that you've experienced? Yes.
Just going on retreat for me.
Going on retreat, okay.
Yeah, specifically last year as well. And yeah, I've just come back from the West Lake retreats actually, but that comes to mind.
Yes.
Normally retreats are, ideal conditions. And I think they are, but there's so many things that trigger me on retreats. So actually continuing to go on retreat, I think, is my version of cremation ground, where it's not comfortable.
Yeah, I think that. So going on retreat can be a cremation ground. It's interesting, you go on retreat, it's quite a comfy house somewhere in the country, isn't it? And you get fed. And from one perspective, it looks really easy. Can you say what it was? I mean, maybe you don't want to share the exact content, but what was the thought? Why was it so scary going on retreat?
Scary is not the right word,
scary.
But I just, as a few people sort of here know, just very, just highly sensitive to a lot of things. So being in the same environment with some, the same people over and over again, and noises in the shrine room and things like that can really get the better of me. But I know that that's the thing that's worth working on. So it's hard work often. Yeah,
it can be hard work going on retreat, and there's for each of us there might be different sort of triggers, is the word you use, but sort of things that challenge us when we're on retreat. And of course, when you're on retreat, you're more, I'm going to say naked. You're not literally naked, but you're naked. You're more naked in that sense than you are in your ordinary life. You don't have all your accoutrements. You've sort of dropped your status. Doesn't matter who you are. You're now in the bunk bed or something. You're just you're doing this repeatedly, turning up your mind, repeatedly seeing into yourself, and that can really give rise. That can really challenge, and it might challenge for a number of reasons. It might be the pain of just feeling how. You tell me what other things are. What other cremation ground stuff? Yeah.
So just before COVID hit, I had a burnout, and then I witnessed something traumatic, and I had a massive breakdown. And I've never been in so much pain in my life. And looking back, it was the most amazing experience. And ever since, I've been on this healing journey where every single trauma I've ever experienced in my life comes up one after the other until I have one little death every single time and a rebirth. And it's beautiful. So for me, these cremation grounds are a place of rebirth.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, the cremation ground is strongly connected to fire, change, transformation, and rebirth. And if we can, if something happens to us, and then we might, if we can approach that in a certain way and Heaven knows it's difficult sometimes. I mean, you just try things in life, don't you? You try this, you try that, you try this therapy, you try sitting on your own, you try whatever you try. Sometimes that can be transformed. That can be a crucible for change. But the thing about the cremation ground is it's going to be, if it's a real cremation ground, it will be pushing you into the place where you really don't want to go, where you feel this is my edge. And it could be just public talking, or it could be, what else? Anybody else got any idea? Pete?
Yeah, I had one
Here
actually when I came and performed some songs for the fundraiser, and I knew it was going to be a good thing for me to do, but I was also really terrified of just performing on my own, and as it was like a deliberately sought out situation as well, and I certainly felt a lot better afterwards.
Yeah, if we can face a fear, even if it's something like, you said, Pete, performing in on your own, music. We have to come to some relationship with our fears and our minds and our energies, don't we? And we have to, in a way, kind of master that moment. I presume that's what people love doing, like danger sports for, because you're putting yourself in danger, literally in danger, and that awareness causes I've done that, and if you climb a cliff face with one hand, you don't half feel an idiot when you're halfway up, I can tell you. You sort of, you know, but everybody's probably, who's tried climbing at some point, you do feel fear, but you have to gather that, don't you? Because you can't move when you're in fear. It's useless. And then there's the buzz of having brought your energies together, so you can carry on climbing, or you can carry on singing, or you can carry on performing, and that, you know. And behind that, you've also changed a view about what you think you can do in the world. You've broken through some part of your limited identity that might be there for all kinds of reasons. Any more? Any more cremation grounds? Yeah.
It's very silly, but I have it with sort of spiders and mice and things in my flat. Because I don't like parts of this practice. I don't like killing them.
Yes.
But I also don't like approaching them. And every time there's like scuttling or movement, and I've literally I went through that thing of just like, that's it, can't go past that point. And then I really tried and then moved, and then I just was like,
Great.
And then I just didn't approach it.
Yeah, that's a really good image. So if you couldn't hear that online, and do share them if you've got them online as well. But so it was about fear of, say, a spider or a mouse, or and wanting to approach it, but equally being horrified of it and drawing back from it. And that point where you feel the edge of your fear. My wife, Joanna, she went on a solitary retreat, her first solitary retreat about 15 years ago. And she was in a hut somewhere in the Devon countryside, in a wood. And as soon as she got there, she immediately started to feel fear. And I'm sure this was also the fear that a woman might feel alone in the countryside. It was a strong fear of being attacked in the hut. And she got to this point where it was like this. And she basically stayed like that for about a week. I mean, obviously she did sleep, but she said she didn't sleep very much. But whenever she was awake, she was just right, and that's the instruction actually, is just to stay, to not move away from that fear, and to kind of just say, well, that's what Ajahn Chadi said, I can't do anything with this. I'm like this, I can't do the nice Buddhist practice here. I'm absolutely up against it. That's with fear. To work directly with fear. But more often the cremation ground is not such a direct fear as that. It's a limit that we put on ourselves, where we need to do something to challenge ourselves a bit. I haven't got long, so I'm going to have to just move on. But you can fear judgment, you can fear losing your name, your good name, you can fear, you can fear losing your social media profile. I think we should have an online cremation ground where you sort of watch your Instagram things just burn, the whole lumps of your social media profile just vanishing in front of your eyes. Am I going to exist after all that's gone? So really this cremation ground, taken metaphorically in the broadest sense, is there a repeated knock at the door in my life? What am I waiting for? And can we hear that voice that is saying, I need to do this or die. I need to change my job, relationship, etc., whatever it is. Or I just need to step out and take more risks. What is it that I... Because if we consistently don't do that, if we consistently don't challenge ourselves in some way, and not necessarily by going into a cremation ground, but in some way, the Dakini, that I'm going to end with, will not arise and will end up losing interest in us. So I'm going to, much more briefly, and we'll end with a visualization of the Dakini. So there's quite a lot of meanings to the word Dakini, I discovered. There is a great book called Meeting the Buddhists by Vasantra, who's a member of our order. It's just a new edition has come out. And this gives you a real wealth of information about the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and the Dakinis and the gurus of the past and all kinds of things that are very interesting. But it's more than information. Vasantra has a really amazing way of making you feel like he's just telling you these stories, and they're very evocative. Great book. It becomes clear that from there that Dakinis can be female Buddhas. They can be the embodiment of your own upsurging energies, and they can they can be a spiritual companion. So if you face your fear, it just gives rise to energy. And when my wife came back from that solitary retreat, she was transformed. I mean, it was a little bit alarming, actually. She hardly, she slept a few hours a night. She was on fire for a long time, and in a way it changed the course of her life, that solitary retreat, I would say. There's a story about meeting the Dakini that Vasantra tells. And, there we go. I lost track of it. Anyway, the story, I know it. A monk, a sort of a Tibetan, I'm going to call him, I've forgotten his name. Anyway, he wanted to find this great teacher. This Dakini he'd heard about this figure, this Dakini, and he knew that he had to go on a journey to find this Dakini. So he went into the jungle and he meditated, and he eventually sat to meditate and had this vision of this Dakini. And we're going to just end with visualizing this ourselves. And he realized that this was the Dakini that he'd been searching for. And the Dakini's first response to him was, "You better get out of here because I'm going to eat you alive. I'm going to eat you." And this is the ogress aspect of the Dakini. And he wasn't afraid. He just said, "Okay, well, I'm staying here. I'm staying here." And her next act was to say, "Well, what have you brought me? You've come all this way. What have you brought me? Have you brought me any gold?" Because this was tradition to give your teacher gold. And he'd stored up gold. And I take this quite, literally in one sense, that these journeys did happen and people did go looking for teachers, and they did go with gold, that you took the most precious thing that you had, that you strived to build up, and you gave it to your teacher, or this person who was going to give you the teaching. So he gave his gold to this teacher, or this Dakini. And the story goes, she just threw it away in the jungle, not interested at all. So the Dakini here is beyond rationality. It's beyond any sense of being pinned down or interested in social conventions. Yeah? This is energy that arises beyond that. We live in I don't know what to say about our society, to be honest. I think the Dakini would probably be fitted with one of those ankle sort of bracelets and given they've got loads of bracelets, but they would probably be Asbo now. It would probably be, it's something that's beyond the constrained way in which our society seems to like moving. So there's not much time, so I'm going to just read it. So I'm going to read you a short passage, and if you can just close your eyes and imagine this figure. And this figure is on the shrine is called Vajra Yogini. Vajra Yogini appears as a 16-year-old girl. She is a virgin, symbol of her complete innocence in relation to samsara. Her body is a brilliant, fascinating red, the colour of arousal and passion. For Vajra Yogini is fiercely in love with the Dharma. She has flowing, dishevelled black hair, for she has gone beyond concern for worldly appearances. She dances, abandoning herself to the inspiration of the Dharma. In her right hand she brandishes a curved knife above her head. This is a brutal implement used by butchers for cutting and flaying. It has a Vajra handle and its blade is razor sharp. With her knife, the Dakini cuts off all attachment, especially concern for the physical body. For the faint-hearted, the brandished knife is a threat of destruction. But for the brave, it's an invitation to approach and be cut free of all limitations. In her left hand, she clasps to her heart the skull cup of shunyata, emptiness, filled with the ambrosia of great bliss. For it is this Mahasukha, great bliss, that the Dakini pours out like wine to her devotees. On her head is a tiara. However, rather than jewels, it's set with 5 human skulls. And these are the reminders of the wisdoms of the 5 Buddhas in a form that cannot be ignored. Around her neck hangs a garland, not of flowers, but of human skulls. There are 50 of them. As her ornaments, they symbolize that the Dakini has purified speech on the subtlest level, as they correspond to the vowels of the Sanskrit alphabet. The circle of heads also suggests the endless round of birth and death. The Dakini thrusts herself beyond it, and life and death become her ornaments. Thus she wears armlets, wristlets, and anklets of human bone. These are the Dakini equivalents of silks and jewels, symbolizing the perfections of the Bodhisattva. While Dakinis are beautiful and can appear in wondrous raiment, it is as though they are too close to the realities of existence to cover themselves in pretty, alluring things. They are the truth. and you can take them or leave them. They're not going to try to entice you. It is as though the bodhisattvas, such as Avalokiteshvara and Tara, are the Dharma experienced in the warmth of your heart. And Dakinis are the Dharma felt in your guts. In the crook of her arm, her left arm, Vajrayogini holds a magic staff, similar to Padmasambhava's. This symbolizes her mystic consort. Though she appears in female form, the Dakini is not lacking masculine qualities. She is the perfect synthesis, feminine and masculine. So she is complete in herself, not needing anything or anyone from outside her to be completely fulfilled. She dances with her right foot raised, so that her legs form a bow and arrow shape. The left leg is the bow, the upraised right leg the arrow. And this symbolizes the inseparability of wisdom and method. The whole movement of her being is upwards. Her hair stands on end. She leaps as she dances, as though impatient to take off into the higher dimension. And in the center of her forehead is a third eye, for she sees a higher truth, a wisdom beyond duality. All around her body the flames leap upward. These are the fires of her soaring inspiration, her unquenchable energy, her purifying wisdom. They are the fires of love burning for all that lives. Her expression is ecstatic. She is drunk with wisdom, entranced with spiritual energy, wild with compassion, insatiable for truth. At the same time, her look is dangerous. Partly I read that out because I didn't really want to explain what a Dakini is. Obviously that's the internal meeting with the Dakini, and it symbolizes all those qualities which arise when we've confronted fear, whether we've confronted some view of ourselves which is no longer serving us, whether we've been a bit, been brave and we've stepped out, we've spoken something that needed to be said, or more profoundly when we've really made inroads into this deep delusion that really only deep practice can get at. This symbolizes, and it's felt. The Tantra talks about energies. The whole language of the Tantra is energetic. In the West, we're so used to thinking about flesh and bone and the floor and the things around us. We think in more materialist terms, but the Tantra talks about energy, and this is upsurging inspiration, and these are energies which are not pinned down by the sense of being, my experience and my identity and my ownership, my experience, even my life. This is something that's beyond that, that's being indicated. How we understand it is who knows what one experiences, what can be experienced. I only have my experience to go on. And when I go on solitary retreat next time, I'm going to try and keep the curtains open and experience that fear. Or thank you for your examples of facing your own fears this evening. But there's another sense of the Dakini, which I'm going to say in just 30 seconds, is more in the ordinary world. The Dakini is the Sangha. The Dakini is the esoteric version of the Sangha jewel. And that's because the Sangha jewel, in its essence, is communication. And the Dakini is this communication of the fire of inspiration. And we might find that embodied in others with whom we have a close relationship. with whom we have a friendship, over time, that communication may be that really personal communication that we need, not an abstract Dharma teaching. It might be the thing which challenges us, that helps us to move on in our lives. Maybe we don't want to hear it, and maybe we're inspired to hear it. But friendship, and this is how we think about it in Triratna a lot, friendship, within close personal friendships that can arise within the Sangha, have that spirit of the Dakini. They have that spirit of communicating something which leads us beyond, and something which is fascinating, that is awakening, that is even arousing, that arouses our energies for practice. We've run out of time, so I will leave it there. I'll leave it there.